Okay. So, okay. It's hard to adjust this thing correctly since I don't use it a lot. Oh, there we go. There we go. Okay. Nah, it's a little crooked. The Catechism of the Council of Trent, Sprague Clark. So, there's so many things to cover in the Catechism, and we should be reading the Catechism daily because lack of knowledge of Catechism has given us the crisis in which we are living, which is faithlessness and ignorance of, of, of the Catholic faith. And I think it's what gave us, at least partially, it's what gave us Vatican II. I recently spoke to a priest from I think it's called the Priestly Society of St. Peter. And I said, how do you reconcile all of the heresies in Vatican II? And he said, it wasn't all heresy. I said, okay. And then someone said, sitting at the table, Vatican II is not ex cathedra. I said, I heard something like that, but I'm not so sure what it means, that it's not ex cathedra. And so he let the layperson explain what was meant by this. And the explanation was, in sum and substance, that you didn't have to believe it because it wasn't ex cathedra. And so I asked the priest, what about guardian angels and the Catechism itself? That's not ex cathedra either. And then he got insulted and told me to schedule an appointment with his secretary so that he can address this in another forum, and suggested that I was spreading confusion. And so I realized that today people are cloaking heresy with the euphemism of it being pastoral. That's pastoral. Well, the term pastor means shepherd. Can you imagine Christ the King giving us a pastoral counsel? What I mean by counsel is small c, a suggestion that is erroneous, to say the least. Not to mention condescending, insulting to the intelligence, and it is a concession to error, something tantamount, I believe, to spitting in the face of Christ the King. That's my opinion of it all. The consequences of sin. Mortal sin makes a man supremely unhappy. Many are the scourges of the sinner, says Psalm 31, verse 10. God calls to the sinner, saying, know thou and see that it is an evil and bitter thing for thee to have left the Lord thy God. Jeremiah 2:19. A man who has forsaken God meets with a similar fate to the man who went from Jerusalem the dwelling place of the living God, down through rough ways to Jericho. The punishment of sin follows immediately upon it, although the day of judgment does not yet come. Mortal sin deprives a man of sanctifying grace and delivers him into the power of the devil. Pretty powerful, right? The Holy Ghost departs immediately from each one, from one who has, and the dove will not remain in unclean places. So the Holy Ghost will not remain in a heart that is defiled by mortal sin. The ungodly says to God, "Depart from us." Job 22:17. For if it gains access to the soul, it robs it of grace, its most precious treasure. It is the death of the soul a man killeth, indeed, through malice. It is the death of the soul a man killeth through malice, indeed. Wisdom, chapter 16, verse 14. Sin, when it is completed, begetteth death. James 1:15. Thus there are men who live and yet are dead. Sinners, says St. John Chrysostom, are dead while they live, and the just live after they are dead, quote unquote. Thou dost weep, says St. Augustine, over a body from which the soul has departed, but not over a soul from which God has withdrawn himself. When God abandons the soul, the devil enters into the soul. By mortal sin, the temple of the Holy Ghost is transformed into a den of robbers. The sister of the angels into the companion of fallen. Lost her rudder is drowned at the mercy of the current. So the soul that has lost divine grace is driven by Satan into perdition. Sin gives the devil power over the soul. For through sin, man places himself under servitude to obey the devil. Romans 6:16. As everyone thinks he may treat a widow as he chooses, as she has no one to protect her. That's sad, right? As everyone thinks he may treat a widow as he chooses, because she has no one to protect her, so the demons do not hesitate to set upon the sinner. They cry, God hath forsaken him, pursue him and take him, for there is none to do him. Psalm 11. Can you believe that? Oh my God. This is what the devil say when you enter into mortal sin. This is according to some LXX. I don't know what that is. God hath forsaken him. Pursue him and take him, for there is none to deliver him. The loss of sanctifying grace entails upon the sinner the following terrible consequences. Number one, he loses the supernatural beauty of the soul and becomes unclean before God. Remember, blessed are the clean of heart, for they shall see God. Two, he loses charity towards God and towards his neighbor as well. Three, his understanding is completely darkened and his will immensely weakened. Four, he loses the merit of all the good works he had previously performed, and none of those which he does in a state of mortal sin gain for him a reward hereafter. Five, thank you. Five, finally, he is liable to fall into other mortal sins. Through mortal sin, we lose the supernatural beauty of the soul and become unclean before God. Mortal sin is to the soul what decay is to an apple. The rottenness destroys the color, the scent, the flavor of the fruit, all, in short, that gives it worth and beauty. So sin robs the soul of all that makes it fair and precious. It would be a sore blow to a bride if she were to be as to become an object of repulsion to betrothed. It is much the same with the soul that is mortal sin. She is thereby so much disfigured that Christ, her spouse, regards her with aversion. Through mortal sin, charity to God and to one's neighbor is lost. When the earth travels away from the sun, winter sets in, so the heart of man becomes cold. When it is estranged from God by mortal sin, the flame of charity is then extinguished. The understanding is completely darkened by mortal sin. As heavy clouds hide the light of the sun from our sight and involve us in darkness, so mortal sin obscures the eye of reason and renders us incapable of perceiving the brightness of the sun of justice. A man who has fallen into mortal sin perceives not, as the apostle says, the things that are of the Spirit of God. 1 Corinthians 2:14. As a mirror covered with mildew no longer reflects the objects presented to it, so the soul, which is sunk in sin, can no longer receive the impressions of divine grace. The sinner is blinded and fails as fully to see the misery and danger of his condition. Darkness of night beside a quarry, where the sinner in a state of grace and enlightened by the Holy Ghost, then the traveler would be, on perceiving in the daylight what a perilous path he has taken. By reason of this blindness, sinners are often gay and light-hearted in spite of their deplorable state. As the maniac laughs frantically while he tears his own flesh, so our erring brethren make merry while in their madness they inflict serious injury on their soul. A living body feels the prick of a needle, not so a corpse. Thus it is with the soul. As long as it preserves its life, it is sensitive to the least sin. But if it be dead, it experiences no sting of conscience, even if it be guilty of grievous crimes. Through mortal sin, the will is immensely weakened. When the cold is extreme, one's limbs are benumbed and paralyzed. So by mortal sin, man loses the power to do what is good. He is held captive by mortal sin, as a bird is by birdlime. Through mortal sin, we lose the merit of all the good works we have previously performed. God says by the mouth of his prophet, if the just man turn himself from his justice and do iniquity, all his justices which he hath done shall not be remembered. Ezekiel 18:24. The just man who falls into mortal sin may be compared to a merchant who has accumulated great treasures and whose vessel founders just as he enters the harbor. Mortal sin sweeps away at one stroke all our good works and all our merits, as a sharp frost cuts off all the fair flowers in one night, or as a hailstorm ruins the crops of a whole year. Who falls into mortal sin earns no reward in heaven for the good works he has performed while in a state of sin. As a branch cut off from the vine withers away and bears no fruit, so a man who has lost sanctifying grace can do no works that are meritorious. The apostles labored all night and took nothing. So the sinner, during the night of sin, cannot, in spite of his utmost exertion, gain any merit for heaven. The soul of a sinner is like a desert where nothing grows, but which is the haunt of reptiles and beasts of prey. How desolate is that spot where God is not. How parched without the dew of heaven. How sterile without the vivifying sun of grace. One mortal sin makes it easy to commit others. When the soul has left the body, decomposition begins, and spiritual decay soon sets in when the Holy Ghost has departed from the soul. A grievous sin which has not the others which follow it as its punishment. The man, says St. Augustine, who persists in his iniquity adds sin to sin. And there you have it. Those are the consequences of mortal sin. It's frightening. Bishop Sanborn says that when you commit a mortal sin, you fall into a ditch and you cannot get out of it. Even though you may think about it, I need to get out of this. You can't. Unless God himself initiate getting out of that ditch. And there might come a time where God says, he has filled up the number of sins. I will rescue him no more. And that is explained by St. Alphonsus de Liguori in one of his sermons. He has a book, and he gives the sermons throughout the year. And one of them is the number of sins beyond which God will not forgive. So, I offer this reading as a meditation so that you don't commit a mortal sin. And that if you have, you go to confession and efface that scar from the soul by the absolution of the priest. And that's it. So I'll end there. That's really enough to think about for the whole week, isn't it? Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one. I think I'm going to do catechetical series, this being one of the first. I'm reading from this book right here. And it is a it's taken from the Catechism of the Council of Trent. I got both of these 12 years ago. Excellent. But we got to read them, right? Okay, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.